Okay, so what if the room you're in right now isn't really there? I know, it sounds a little crazy, but we're about to dive into a theory that completely challenges our most fundamental idea of reality itself. It suggests that the world we see is basically just a user interface, and we're going to try and peek at the operating system running underneath it all.
That quote, that's from the legendary physicist Leonard Susskind. And, he's not being metaphorical or poetic here. He is literally suggesting that the solid, three-dimensional space you feel like you're sitting in right this second, well, it's not fundamentally real.
Now, to be clear, he's not saying your GPS is broken or anything like that. The mistake he's talking about isn't in our measurements. No, it's a much, much deeper error, almost a philosophical one. We've basically confused the user interface, the reality our brains built for us, with the actual code, the real operating system of the universe.
See, the way Susskind explains it, our whole perception of 3D space is, well, it's an evolutionary hack. Think about it. It was super useful for our ancestors to be able to judge the distance to a predator or figure out how far away shelter was, right? But evolution, it doesn't really care about the deep, metaphysical truth of things. It just cares about what works for survival. So our sense of space, it's just a tool. It's not a clear window into how reality is really structured.
Okay, so that naturally leads to a massive question. If the very stage our lives play out on, space itself, is just some kind of convenient illusion, then what's the real show? What's the fundamental stuff that reality is actually built from?
Well, one really elegant and frankly powerful answer comes from a framework called the Information Manifold Model, or IMM for short. It was developed by Travis Bergen, and it offers up a completely new story for what reality actually is. And at its core, the model is actually beautifully simple. It says reality has two main layers. You've got the information manifold, or M. You can think of this as the deep, true reality, a vast space of pure information, all possible states, all the underlying structure. And then you have experiential space, or E. And that is the world we actually see and touch and measure. It's the limited, projected reality our brains build for us.
Right, so the big question is, how do we get from that deep, hidden, informational reality to the world we're all experiencing right now? Well, IMM says there's a single, incredibly powerful mechanism that connects these two layers. It's called experiential projection. Basically, it's a process that maps the true reality, the information manifold, M, onto our limited reality, the experiential space, E. But, and this is the absolute key, it is not a one-to-one copy, not even close. You can have multiple, completely distinct states in the true reality that all get mapped or projected to the exact same outcome in our experience. And this leads to the single most important consequence of the whole theory. Because that projection is many to one, you can't reverse it. It's a one-way street. The very act of creating our experience, of observing the world, irreversibly destroys information. All those deep relational details, they're gone, lost forever in that moment of projection.
Now, you've got to hold on to that idea because it's a big one. IMM claims that this single irreversible act of losing information, this projection, is the engine that drives everything we see in the universe. Things like probability, the arrow of time, even gravity, they're all just downstream consequences of this one simple process. And this is where things get really cool, because this is where the dominoes start to fall. We're about to see how that one simple idea, losing information during projection, logically builds up the biggest pillars of modern physics, one after the other. So here's the roadmap for how this all works. First, the projection gives us probability. From probability, we get entropy and the arrow of time, and from that, believe it or not, we get gravity itself. It's just a stunning, logical chain of events. Okay, domino number one, probability. So in quantum mechanics, there's this thing called the Born rule. It tells us how to calculate the odds of something happening, and it works perfectly. The problem is, nobody knows why it works. Well, IMM says it's not some fundamental law of the universe at all. Instead, it's just the geometric scar, the residue left over after the projection process wipes out all that deeper relational information. Probability is just what's left of the geometry once the information is gone. All right, next domino, entropy and time. Why does time only seem to move in one direction? Forward. Again, IMM says this isn't a fundamental law. It's a direct result of that projection. Every single observation, Every moment we experience is another projection, another act of losing information forever. The arrow of time is just the universe accumulating these little scars of information loss. You can't rewind time for the same reason you can't unburn a piece of paper. The information that made it up is just gone. And that brings us to the final and maybe most incredible domino, gravity. So if these repeated projections create entropy, right, and that entropy builds up differently in different places, well, that means the information manifold itself starts to get bent and deformed. And what IMM proposes is that gravity isn't some fundamental force pulling on things in space. It's the emergent effect of things just trying to move through this underlying information landscape, a landscape that's been warped and curved by the sheer weight of all that accumulated, lost information.
So you see the unified story here? It's all connected. Probability is the leftover residue from a single projection. Entropy is the buildup of information loss from tons of projections. And gravity is just the curvature created by all that built-up loss. It's all one beautiful geometric cascade that starts from just one single mechanism, experiential projection.
Okay, I know that is a mind-blowing story, but is that all it is? Just a cool story? Is this actual science? Or is it more like science fiction? Because, a real scientific theory has to be testable. It's got to make predictions that, at least in principle, you could prove wrong. And IMM does exactly that. The papers that lay out this model have very clear, falsifiable predictions. For example, if you set up a simulation with these repeated projections, entropy has to grow. You have to see curvature emerge from the different levels of entropy. And this one is crucial. The whole system must become unstable if you try to overload it with projections faster than it can handle them. If any of these things turn out to be false, the theory is wrong. It's that clean and simple. But what's really fascinating here is that, yeah, you can test these big predictions in a lab, but the theory also makes a really surprising prediction about something much closer to home, something I'm almost certain you felt yourself. I'm talking about that strange, kind of uncomfortable, almost alien feeling you get when you stare at your own reflection in a mirror for just a little too long. The theory actually has a name for this: mirror exposure. The idea is that when you look in a mirror, you are just flooding your brain's internal model of you with this really high-density, static projection of yourself. It bypasses the normal, fluid way you usually integrate information about who you are. Your system gets overloaded with this repetitive external data, and it starts to lose coherence. And the result of that overload? That exact feeling of discomfort and alienation?
And this is what really shows the power of the model. That weird feeling you get from the mirror, it might not just be psychological. According to IMM, it's a direct, low-energy signature of projection overload. It's the exact same physical mechanism that, when scaled up to a cosmic level, creates the arrow of time and the force we call gravity.
Which really leaves us with one last, pretty provocative thought. If this model is even close to being right, it means the deepest laws of physics and the most intimate structures of our own consciousness, well, they aren't two different things to study. They might just be two sides of the very same coin. Information, projecting itself, and in the process, creating our reality.